Welcome to God's Powerful Son, your GPS, Directions to Eternity, with references from the Life Application Study Bible NIV. Here's your host, David Brower, a true child of God.
Thanks, Ellen. This is David Brower, reminding you that you don't need to take notes on this podcast. The complete transcript is in the Our Blog section at gps2eternity.com. In this edition of Your GPS to Eternity, we are talking about parables. Jesus used many stories or parables when speaking to the crowds. These stories compare something familiar to something unfamiliar, helping us understand spiritual truth by using everyday objects and relations as illustrations. Jesus' parables draw willing listeners into discovering truth, while at the same time concealing truth from those too lazy or too stubborn to see it. To those who are honestly searching, the truth becomes clear. I think you'll agree that it's more poignant to hear the truth about someone else's struggles and sin than it is to hear about those same struggles and sin specifically being told about ourselves. Similarly, we tend to be able to grasp spiritual truths and the beauty and reality of our salvation by Christ's atoning work on the cross, if we are told a story that paints a parallel illustration. In all, Jesus told 22 parables that were recorded in the book of Matthew, 10 parables in the book of Mark, and 10 in the book of Luke. If we take them at face value, the parables Jesus told can seem like nice tales of morality and read like a how-to. Here's an example. But suddenly, when the crowds come to hear him, he hops into a boat and speaks in parables, stories about sowing seeds and gathering wheat, Matthew 13:2. When the disciples ask him why, since they obviously notice the change, his answer may seem even more astonishing. To you, it has been granted to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them, it has not been granted. Matthew 13:11. In other words, the parables are meant to divide the crowd. While this may seem as if Jesus denied some people access, the difference he means is not in the message, but in the response. The parables themselves present clear stories from everyday events that many in the crowd would recognize. Jesus did not code his teaching to prevent some people from understanding, since all equally would understand the imagery. All those gathered there certainly comprehended the aspects of the stories related to their everyday lives. Instead, his teaching divided the listeners into two groups based on their own responses. His miracles had attracted many, and others had perhaps been astonished by his earlier teaching. But the parables themselves, just as in the story of the seed falling on various places, Matthew 13:3-9, revealed the true nature of their responses and their real decisions. Those committed to the kingdom of God would seek and find further understanding, but those uncommitted, perhaps listening only because of the initial excitement, would reject the teaching as unintelligible. So, for those whom Christ was transforming by his life and words, the parables would do their work to soften and instruct. But to those who had merely been enamored by, say, Jesus' miracles and sensational reputation, his stories would have no deeper meaning, much as the Bible holds deeper revelation for those in whom the Spirit dwells, but not for the unredeemed. What can we learn from the over 100 of Jesus' parables in the Bible? Well, besides the obvious moral of the story, there is much to be learned in the parables about the nature of God and the redeeming love of Christ. As an example, in the parable of the wheat in the weeds, Matthew 13:24-30, we are reminded how easy it is to judge one another, but it is so hard for us to know the actual truth about a person. We can be reminded that only God serves as the judge of the hearts of mankind, and that's a freeing truth. We must be careful not to read too much into parables, because each of them has one central meaning, unless otherwise specified by Jesus Christ. Until next time, this is David Brower, asking you to remember that God's powerful Son is your GPS, providing you with directions to Eternity.
You've been listening to God's Powerful Son, your GPS, Directions to Eternity. New podcasts are available Sunday mornings at 8 a.m. Eastern. Podcast transcripts are available at gps2eternity.com. That's GPS, the number 2, eternity.com. Just click on our blog. Thank you for listening, and may God bless you and your family.